Hi, I'm Patty Asai, and welcome to the first episode of my podcast, No Romance Without Finance. I am so excited to be doing this podcast. I am pumped up. I am ready to go. I have wanted to do this for years and years and years. I've just been so busy and have been unable to get it together, and I finally have gotten it together. And I really, really am passionate about this podcast that we're doing called No Romance Without Finance. And here is why I'm so passionate about it and my intention behind this podcast. I'm a big intention person, and everything that I do has to have some sort of intention. I don't do things just to do them. So my intention for this podcast is to honor my mother. Due to her lack of financial independence, she was stuck in a mentally abusive relationship that she couldn't get out of. She saw no way out. And in the process, she lost herself, she lost her self-esteem, and eventually it cost her her life. And after her death, I made it my mission to make sure that not one other woman suffers like my mom and is in a relationship that she can't get out of, it ends up like my mom, because she doesn't have the financial means to leave. And that was so important for me. And that has been my mission since I was in my mid-20s. And I finally have figured out the platform to do it. And with each episode that I do, I want to give you tools and nuggets of knowledge that you could implement immediately in your lives that is going to yield to positive results, right? So whatever you hear on the podcast, there's something that you can take away from it, you can implement it, and your life can just get better. So that's the intention for the podcast. And here we go. I am so thrilled to have my first guest. She is a dear friend of mine, and she would have been my first guest even if she weren't my dear friend. I have so much respect for her. Her name is Jodi Harrison Bauer, and she is the host of Fearlessly Authentic, which is a podcast that I did years ago, and that's how I met her. And it was really kind of cool because when she called me before the podcast, we spoke for over an hour, and we didn't even know each other. So right then and there, I knew that she and I were soul sisters. And Fearlessly Authentic is a live radio show and podcast. She's the founder and owner of the award-winning Jodi Fit Boutique Fitness Studio. Listen to this. She is a 2-time world bikini champion, my goodness, and the oldest woman to ever compete for the iconic Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue, making global headlines. Insane. Jodi has been featured on Good Morning America, Inside Edition, the New York Post, People Magazine, and more. Jodi's mission began at 42 years old when she changed her life forever. She took control of her own happiness, stepped out of the box society put her in, and she started over. At 62 years young, which I just can't believe, she's like Benjamin Button, Jodi refers to herself as ageless and fearless warrior who dedicates her work to educating, empowering, and inspiring women to let no obstacle keep them from the life they deserve. Welcome, Jodi. Hi.
Thank you so much for having me on your new show. I'm so excited for all the nuggets of knowledge you're going to be throwing out there in the universe for everybody. You are somebody I very much look up to and have so much respect for, all the knowledge that you're sharing with everybody, because the world needs you. So I am thrilled to know you.
Thank you, Jodi. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm a huge fan of your podcast too.
Thank you.
And you're in Miami, right? That's where you are right now?
I'm in Miami now visiting my daughter. Yes. So I'm not in my normal place. Yeah. Yes, so the weather's beautiful here, and this is eventually where I want to end up instead of the Northeast.
So you live in the Northeast. Where do you tell the listeners where you live?
I live outside. Well, everybody knows where Yale is. So I live I live outside of that area on the water.
Okay. I want to talk about your amazing home, right? And the story behind your amazing home. If you could share that with us, because her home looks like a museum.
Oh,
and it has a great story behind it.
Oh, did I ever tell you that story?
Yes, you did.
I did.
Yes, you
okay.
did.
So the house was built.
About your husband.
Well, no. It was built in 68. So no, it wasn't built by him.
Right. But didn't he walk by that? No, I know. But didn't he see that as a young guy and then wanted to live there?
Oh, okay. All right. Right. So he grew up very, very poor. His father was a window washer. Right. He used to wash windows with his dad. Shout out to my husband, Frank. And they used to wash windows. As a small child, he would go with his dad and he learned how to wash windows. So he would go to all these amazing homes in Greenwich, Connecticut, in Saddle River, New Jersey, and all the really affluent areas in New Jersey, New York, Connecticut. Mm-hmm. And he grew up very poor in Paterson, New Jersey. So anybody who's from Paterson understands what the area is like. And he would see these mid-century modern homes, which back then when he was a child in the 60s and 70s, they weren't considered mid-century modern homes, but he just remembers looking at the architecture and go, these are so cool. So where we live now, you do not see homes like that. You see a lot of Dutch colonials because it is, it's by the beach. So you see everything is very beachy, more like Hamptons, even though the Hamptons have a lot of mid-century modern homes now, but more Cape Cod-ish. So yes, he saw this home. It was built in 68 by a student of Frank Lloyd Wright's, and it's very cool. And we have a huge rock in the house, and it's just very cool. He found it, and he was like, oh my God, we have to have this house. And nobody in the area would ever understand this kind of architecture. So when people come in still after all these years, they're like, wait, is that a real rock? Like, yeah, it's a rock. It's not just a little rock. It's the size of it's in our kitchen. It's the entire size of our kitchen. It's crazy. Yes.
Amazing. I love that story. I love that story because, it's kind of going from the window washer, right, to owning a home like this. That's just amazing.
No, it's a beautiful story. It's a beautiful, beautiful story. And I've learned to like the architecture. It's not I've learned to like it. It's not my absolute favorite, but I do like it.
Right.
It's cool.
Right. Okay, great. So now that we talked about your beautiful home, I want to really start with, tell us a little bit about how you grew up. And I know that, at the age of 42, you changed your life. So tell us a little bit about your background and what happened at the age of 42.
Okay. I grew up, my dad was a salesman. He could sell anything to anybody. He was the consummate salesman, he had that real soft sale pitch. He closed probably 95% of the sales. My dad sold encyclopedias, vacuum cleaners, baby furniture, insurance. He sold it all. My mom was what they called back then a homemaker. She was raising me and my two younger sisters. And prior to that, she had also been sort of in sales. So I grew up with that type of personality. My mom was outgoing. My dad was quiet, reserved, not your typical salesperson again, but he just had a way of making that sale every single time. Mm-hmm. And so growing up, my mom had more money than my dad did from their families.
Really?
My mom's family owned a lot of real estate. And they were also in the furniture business. So they owned real estate and they were furniture makers. When they all came here from Poland, they learned they were furniture makers. And so my grandfather by trade was a furniture maker, but he also had the sense to buy real estate. Who knew?
Right.
So
amazing.
My dad grew up in a very blue collar area. And my mom was like, we're not going to live in that area. We're going to move elsewhere. All they could afford at the time was in that area. My mom's like, we got to get the hell out of here. It wasn't like Paterson at all, but it was very, lower class, middle class. I don't know. I hate to say those things.
No.
So everybody, So anyway, we finally moved out of there when I was about 9 years old, and we moved to a more affluent area. And I always had this feeling that my dad, who made a lot of money because he was in sale, it was either feast or famine. And it's weird. I just started talking about this, Patty, because I was embarrassed. I still have not talked about it on any of my social platforms. So you are the first person to hear me say all of this shit out loud.
I'm honored.
I think it's because I lost my mom the day after my birthday in 2021, and I didn't feel like I can talk about this stuff until after she passed. And I don't know. I did a lot of inner child work, and I went back into my childhood to just understand myself better. And I was able to talk to my little sister about it, who's 5 years younger than me. My middle sister didn't really want to talk about it. Anyway, so we moved to a more affluent area. It was typical, like middle class, upper middle class area. It wasn't Greenwich. When I say more affluent, it wasn't Greenwich. And everybody knows what Greenwich is like. So, but I felt like my mom was trying to keep up with the Joneses. Do you know what I'm saying? So my dad, it was either feast or famine. So when he made a shit ton of money, things were great and they spent all this money. They were not savers. So they spent what they made. My mom was still a stay-at-home mom. And they just didn't, there were children who were born in the Depression era, 1931 and 1935. So then they start making money and, basically you grow up, if you were born in the 60s like I was, 1960, you're born with parents raised in that era. A lot of them don't know what to do with the money they make. And they weren't really taught that by their parents. And
so they just spend it.
They either spent it or they figured it out better than my dad did. So we went through a lot of ups and downs. It was very embarrassing for me. I was humiliated by the fact that I knew when my parents were struggling. And I knew when we were.
How did you know?
Because there was tension in the house.
How did you know when your parents were?
There was tension in the house.
Money causes a lot of tension in the house, right? Yeah.
It really does. And when my dad was making a lot of money, he spent it like we went on great trips and he bought my mom lots of jewelry and mink coats and they had parties and my mom always had, I know you talk about the handbags. My mom was a big Gucci girl back then. And so she had the mink coats and the Gucci bags. And I still have a few of her Gucci bags. And, it's just, I saw them. I saw it. And And then when my dad got sick, it was hard for him to pay the bills. When I went to college, I went to a private school. I went to Simmons College. It wasn't cheap. And they found a way for me to go, but I did have to take out student loans. And I said, when I have children, they will not have student loans. My parents did not save it all to send any of us to college. So we all went to college. They're like, okay, you want to go to this expensive college? You're going to have to pay for it. So I worked from the time I was 16. And the only time I stopped working was when I, had my first daughter in 89. And then I got divorced at 42. And that's when my life changed also. But for me, Patty, what I learned from seeing how my parents struggled was I will never struggle like that. Never, ever, 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 ever. I will not pass that gene down to my children. And I will never allow this to happen because it was embarrassing and humiliating. And there was just no way I would. I would always have my own money. And when I didn't have a lot of money, I friggin' figured out how to get that money and saved and saved and saved. Yeah, I was never afraid of the hustle.
I want to go back regarding your parents' relationship. When things are good, when there's a lot of money around, everything's great, right? And when things are tight, did you notice that one person had more say-so over the way the money was spent and things that you guys would do with the money, since your mom was a stay-at-home mom and your dad was the one bringing in the money? Did you ever notice that?
My mom had to say about how the money was spent 100%.
She did. Great.
My dad would hand over the paycheck and my mom would spend it.
Oh, yeah. See, so that's kind of unconventional, right? Because typically the man brings home the paycheck And the woman, is told this is what you can do with the money and this is what you can't do with the money.
She wore the pants. She wore the pants. He made the money. She disciplined us. She made the rules. She said when we're going on vacation, my dad, it was just like his name was Stan. Stan, go to work. Just go to work. Go to work. And when he wasn't, and when things were tough and tight, and it was feast time. It was famine time.
Right.
She would be like, get something else. Go here, go there. My mom was,
got it.
Go.
Right. And so you attribute your hustle based on the feast and famine that you experience, right? Because I think that's where my hustle comes from, is that, I've been working since I was 10. I used to go door to door collecting people's garbage. I don't know if I told you, hoping they'd give me a quarter. Yeah, my apartment building. That's my first job ever. And that's because, we were immigrants, came to the United States, didn't have any money because my parents couldn't work in their respective fields due to the language barrier. So my dad couldn't get a job, my mom couldn't get a job, and I realized very quickly that if I wanted anything, I needed to get it for myself. So I started working at the age of 10, and to this day, I am afraid of being broke. Like, as I sit here with you today, I still have that fear when it's not even logical, right? Like in my mind, I am financially secure, but the fear of being broke is still what drives me. It's something that, it keeps going. And because of that, I don't know if I'll ever retire because I don't know if I'll ever feel comfortable not working. And it's because of, I guess, trauma that we experience as children.
I really agree with you on that one as well. And I think with the second husband, Frank, the man I'm married to now, because of the way he grew up really poor. Like, I didn't grow up like that.
Sure.
So right. We have that same mentality of like, let's keep going. We'll figure it we'll figure it out. I mean, he's been a doctor for a very long time, but right. You've met two people who are not afraid to work hard. And I think that is, we could get on that another time, but that is a problem that I see with a lot of the millennials, my children.
Right.
Which
absolutely.
They're not like that. They do work hard, but I see that as a thing. So
sure. I mean, I see so many people on TikTok, so many younger girls saying, "Oh, I just don't want to work that hard. And I unfortunately think that they don't really understand what that means. And I don't think that they understand that not having your own income means that you're giving up other things in your life, right? Like, so you're giving up your financial independence, you're giving up your say-so in the relationship. There's so much you're giving up. And why wouldn't you want to work hard? Why wouldn't you want to excel? Why is mediocrity just all of a sudden okay?
And that's sort of what I want to start talking about. And maybe you're giving me the confidence to do that. Talk about more so. Because when I did marry my first husband, one of the reasons I was very attracted to him was because of the fact I'm only attracted to men who work hard because of that's what I
absolutely, and that's who you are.
That's who I am. But I just wanted to have the same values as that person. So
sure.
When I married him, one of the reasons that I married him was I loved him, of course, at the time, but it was that he knew how to work hard. He had come from a family who was financially stable. His dad was a CPA. It was a 2 CPA little tiny firm, and my ex, worked for a Big 8 back then when they had Big 8 accounting firms. He worked for a Big 8 accounting firm. He was a CPA before he graduated from college. And I was like, this is the drive that I want. This is the kind of person I want. And because he came from such a financially stable family, that gave me the feeling that I would never have again because of the way I was raised.
Right. You won't have the instability.
Never have, right. I wouldn't have that financial instability. Who know there would be emotional instability, but the financial instability would be there. And that's what I needed the most at that time.
And were you working?
So I worked until I got pregnant and had my child in 89. And our decision at the time, I was a buyer for a large department store that has been sold many, many times. But it was like a Macy's. I was, you know, did really, really well.
Fun.
I was buyer of the year every year. I was assistant buyer of the year every year. I mean, I left on a high with this big belly, and we had decided that I was going to be a stay-at-home mom. And at that point, I was really ready. Like when I had this child, I was like, I want to be home like my mom was, like his mom was, because again, that was a different era, but I wanted to do that. So I had, oh boy, this brings up so many memories. I was so excited to stop working because I was tired. You know, I was 9 months pregnant and I was tired. I wanted to have this baby and be home there for her and enjoy all the different, just raising a child. A year after Alyssa was born, I loved being a mom. I love being a mom more now than when they were babies, but I loved being a mom, but I missed my autonomy. I missed getting paid. I missed validation. I missed the meetings. I missed being a superstar. Now I'm just Alyssa's mom and Mark's wife with no paycheck. And now I'm dependent on this man for everything, emotional, financial, and that's where he wanted me.
Yes,
that's where he
of course.
wanted me. Of course, but I didn't know. I thought, great, I'm going to meet this man. He comes from a financial stable family. You know, I'm 24. Have Alyssa at 28, and it's funny because so many women I talked to who I was friends with were like, Jodi, you have this amazing life. Like you have everything you want. Like even my daughter, my youngest daughter, saw an old picture of us when I was like 35. She goes, Mom, you've got all these diamonds on. You've got like this gold Rolex on.
Yeah.
You live in this big house. You've got cleaning ladies twice a week. You've got, daycare. You've got everything. And I was like, yeah, but I wasn't happy. And that's when I decided to get into fitness, was right after, I was always in the fitness industry, but really that's when I started doing something part-time, was when I went into my briefcase. Do people even have briefcases anymore? I went into my briefcase and I looked at all of my reports and I realized, wow, I was a real hot shit. And I was making like back in 89, I was making like $55,000 a year.
Wow. That's a lot back then.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
that's a lot.
Because he was such a planner, what we did for the year before, as soon as we found out I was pregnant, we started just living off of what he made and saving everything that I made, because he was just smart like that. So anyway,
I mean, I think
that's what happened.
And I want to go back to, you were saying that that's what he wanted and that's where he wanted you. And I think that men sometimes do this. I don't even think it's consciously. I think it's subconsciously, that they are inculcated to think that it is my job to provide and protect. And I always say that that whole provide and protect thing is really the biggest Jedi mind trick that we women are believing, because we are meant, we think that we are meant to let a man provide us with financial stability, protect us, meaning who we can talk to, who we can't talk to, what we can wear, what we can't wear, because he knows better, right? He's trying to protect us from the world out there because we don't know, right? And financially, the man knows better financially, so he has to provide for us. And we think, okay, well, that's security, right? I mean, it would make anyone feel secure. Right. But most people don't understand what you're giving up for that security, right? So in exchange for that security, you're giving up who the hell you are and what you want to do. And we women, I think also have been, especially lately, have been really ostracized for not for thinking that being a mother is not enough, right? So we're told that, well, being a mother is enough. That should fulfill you. And it's like, why? Because being a mother has nothing to do with who I am. It's my relation to somebody else, my relationship to my child, right? And it's not something that can fulfill me completely. Did you feel like that? And can you tell us a little bit about how you were feeling and how that was manifesting inside you?
Yeah, my daughters know it too, and they don't feel less loved because of it. But just as my oldest daughter's friends are starting to have children, second children, she's asking me more questions about that. But yes. So when I explained that I went into that closet and looked in my briefcase, that's when I first realized that I lost myself. And I thought, oh shit, I'm losing myself. Now, we didn't have all of these cliches that we have now, but I knew, and I remember it like it was yesterday, that I looked at that briefcase and I thought, oh my God, like I love being a mom, but I want to do both. I want to be a mom.
Right.
And I want to have my own money, and I want to have relationships with people at work, and I want the validation of being a great mom and doing a great job. Because let's face it, it's not about an insecurity of the validation. We all want to be validated. We all want to know. We don't need it all the time. Some people more than others. Right. But like when you win an award, or you're being, you get a raise or whatever it is, or you're asked to go on a bike trip to, Korea. Those are all things. And like, now I'm just stuck at home with this kid who drives me crazy. So as she knows, I've told her.
Yes.
And so, yes, I lost myself and wasn't sure if the marriage was going to last. He then, after we had Alyssa, which got even worse, got me deeper into the marriage, was then he decided to go to law school to become a forensic accountant. So now we're 2 years, 4 years, 5 years into our marriage. We got married in 85, so this is 1990. So he goes to law school part-time for 4 years.
Oh, my goodness.
And working full-time as a CPA. So like 60, 70, 80 hours a week and 4 hours. Now, who has to deal with this? Me.
Right. You.
I have to deal with this. And then we had Lexi a year after he graduated from, and then I thought I was losing my mind after Lexi. That's when I started really, in 93, after I had her, really starting to understand myself more, that I had no more confidence. I was only allowed to do the things, just as you explained, I was only allowed to do the things that he approved of me doing. For example, I went to the gym every day. I was training people on the side. I was teaching classes on the side to have my own money, to feel like I was doing something else. I also was a perfume spritzer. So again, having my own money.
Sure.
Only, though, I was only allowed to do those things while he was at work and his mother was watching our daughters. I was not allowed
that's where the control
to work
comes in.
On the weekend. I was not allowed to work at night, only during the day.
Sure.
And if his mother was babysitting, that was it.
Right.
So that's why I was allowed to go to the gym. And when he felt like I was getting too fit,
looking too good, too hot.
He body shamed me.
Wow.
So I was a prisoner. I always say I was the most well-dressed nanny, because that's what I was. I was a friggin' nanny.
Right.
Who wore Dolce & Gabbana.
Oh.
So I was the best dressed. So what I was allowed to do, Patty, was I was very involved in Hadassah, which is a women's Zionist organization. I'm Jewish. And I was involved to be in the Hadassah group. So I was allowed to go to a meeting once a month. He never cleaned up the kitchen. I would have dinner ready. I would have it on the stove. The kids would be bathed. I know, I bet you can't believe that was me, but that was me.
I can't.
I can't believe it was
so
me
unlike
either.
you. Oh.
It is. And so, and I would say, hey, listen, if you can make sure that the kitchen is cleaned up, you know, we lived in this huge freaking house that the kitchen was never cleaned up. And then I became president of that because I always strive to be my best in everything that I do.
Right.
So I became the president of this group and went to Israel. He allowed me to go to Israel because I was voted top 40, under 40 women of leadership.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah, so that was very cool. So he allowed me to do things with Hadassah, but nothing else. So when I told him I wanted to compete in fitness shows at 35, he said, as long as you're my wife, that's not allowed.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So then what did you do? And at that point, when he says this to you, how do you feel? I mean, are you feeling like this. I need to get out? Yeah. How did you feel right then?
Oh, after I had Alexis in 93, by the time, so I was 32, by the time I was 35, I'm like, I got to get out of this relationship. But I had such small children.
Feeling suffocated, right?
Like I couldn't breathe. I couldn't breathe.
Yeah.
So I did what a lot of women do. They either have affairs, drink, drugs, shop, or I don't know what else they do. I shopped.
Yeah, I mean, you need an outlet.
I shopped.
Oh. Yeah.
I became shopped. I spent so much money on stuff I never wore. So when I see these 30-somethings right now spending money like they're dying tomorrow, I'm like, girl, stop. What else is really going on?
Yes.
So he sent me to a therapist.
Yeah, because that's the only thing that makes you feel better, right? That's why you were shopping, because that is the only thing that made you feel better.
It made me feel seen. It made me feel right. It was a high. It was like having a shot of tequila or whatever people do.
Yes.
I didn't want to have an affair. I didn't want to do any of those things. I liked shopping. So I went shopping and I bought clothes. I'd buy it. I'd be on this huge high and then to walk out of the store with $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 worth of clothes in like before 2002. Like I know how to spend, girlfriend. And
clearly.
Yeah. And I'd get in the car and I'd take the drive home. And I'd get home and I'd open up these bags. I would have to hide them from him. I was able to open up a store credit card. So I just paid off whatever money I could get. Wow. And that because I knew where he hid the cash in the house. So I would just, it's a horrible way to live. It's a horrible way to live. So I knew I had to get out. I didn't like myself. I didn't like the mom that I was showing my children that I was becoming, even though they were still very young and didn't see that. But I knew if this continued, this was going to turn out bad. I was either going to be, I had to go on Zoloft because there was no way I can deal with the anxiety I started having when he walked in the door every night and started saying, did the girls do their homework? Did you feed the dogs? Why are the dogs barking? Why is the kitchen such a mess? Why hasn't Alyssa done her homework? Why is Alexis still up?
Yeah. And so there are so many women out there that are currently feeling the way that you're explaining, right? That are going through the same thing. What happened that made you finally say, I have to get out, and how did you do it?
I think the turning point was that I was getting older. I was now 38, 39. And I said, I can't continue on this path. There's never going to be a good time to get a divorce, just like there's never a good time to die. There's never a good time to get a divorce. My daughter was 12. We were planning her bat mitzvah. And I'm like, okay, I'll do it after her bat mitzvah. And then what's going to happen? Then Alexis's bat mitzvah is going to come up. And then we're going to hit our 20th wedding anniversary. Yes. And then I'm going to be 50.
And then it's Christmas.
And then it's Christmas. Then it's my birthday.
And it's the holidays. And then, right.
So I realized that there was never a good time. So I started seeking out attorneys. My cousin was, so my ex-husband was involved in, as a forensic accountant, he did a lot of high-end, he was the financial expert, he was the expert who came in to help the wives find the money that their husbands were hiding. So he did a lot of high-end celebrity divorces with attorneys. So he is an attorney, but he came in as the forensic accountant expert, as I'm sure you're aware of, like in your world.
Sure.
So nobody wanted to touch me with a 10-foot pole because they all knew him. So I reached out to my cousin, who was a divorce attorney, who actually worked on a lot of cases against my ex-husband and thought he was an asshole also. But he said he couldn't help me just because he had done so much work with and against my ex. But what he did say to me was, Jodi, look, you're 40 years old. The writing's on the wall. Don't be one of those women. This was the best advice I got. Don't be one of those women that come back to me 10 years later at 50 and tell me the same story. So what he was saying,
I just got chills.
The story's not going to change, Jodi. I know the asshole that you're married to. He is an ass.
Yep.
Get out now. Get out now. So
wow.
I did. So at 42, I was divorced. So
so how did you find an attorney? Wait, go back. Who decided? How did you find your attorney that was finally going to represent you?
It was really, really hard. I did not find the best attorney because all the best attorneys in Connecticut and New York were taken by my ex-husband.
Right.
As soon as I said my last name.
And can you imagine? No, go ahead, please.
No. As soon as I said my last name without the Bauer at the end of it, everybody knew who my ex was. So they were like, Jodi, I'm sorry, but I can't represent you.
And I think one thing that we should really also consider is you're one of the fortunate ones because you could afford an attorney, right? So there's so many women out there that are in the same exact situation. Their husbands are assholes, they're high profile people, and they don't have access to money, right? The husband all of a sudden, wants to cut off the credit cards, wants to cut off all your access.
He did.
Or maybe they don't even have money. He did. Okay. Yeah, that's very common, is that the second that they think that you're going to get a divorce, that's it. You're cut off.
Well, I did give him a warning. I did say to him, hey, listen, I'm going to therapy for my shopping problem. So I'm basically what I said. I'll just cut to the chase. I said to him, listen, I'm not happy. I know you must not be happy because if I'm not happy, you're not happy. So I want to get separated or divorced. If you don't want to do either one of those, could you please go to therapy? So he was also one of those guys who doesn't believe in therapy, right?
Right. Of course.
So
Of course.
So, of course, he then told me he would go. He's like, I don't believe in separation. We either stay married or get divorced. I go, well, I guess we're going to get divorced. Now I'm shaking in my pants. I don't know what I'm going to do. I haven't worked since 1989, and it's now like 2000. So, I'm training people, but I don't have a job, a job.
Correct.
So, not the training. I've been a trainer my whole life, but that, you know what I mean? I don't have.
No, I know what you mean.
Business.
Yes, you have to have something regular that you can count on, that you can depend on, that you can support yourself, support your kids if need be. Yeah. Doing training on the side is not going to get that for you.
No, and especially it's not going to give me the lifestyle that I was accustomed to at the time.
Exactly.
So he told me he was going to get therapy, and he lied. I found out that he lied. So then he said, so then we went to see a therapist that he picked, he picked out. He finally found a therapist that he picked out who wasn't a therapist for us to go to because he already was dealing with my ex-husband. So I was already out. By that time, after he lied to me, I said, we're out. And after I filed, he could not believe it, and he was served. And of course, I made sure that he was served in a place where it wasn't at his office. And I remember he called me. I was picking up my prescription for Zoloft, and he's like, I can't believe you did this. I go, can't believe what? It was January 2002. And he said, January 2002. And he said, I can't believe you actually filed for divorce. This is the biggest mistake you're ever going to make in your entire life. You will regret this for the rest of your life.
Yep. Famous last words.
Yep. Yep. I said, just watch
which is
me.
complete bullshit.
Right. Right. But I was scared.
Awesome.
I was very, very scared, Patty. I was very, very scared.
Right.
And I had no support from my family or my friends. My dad was afraid that I would, not have any money, and that I had this amazing lifestyle. And obviously growing up the way I grew up, this was a ballsy move for me. It was very, very ballsy. And again, my friends were like, why are you doing this? Like, can't you just deal with him? And I'm like, I can't.
Right. Right. And this goes to also something that I see a lot on TikTok are videos of kept women. This is how I live my life as a kept woman. I go to the gym, I go to Gucci, I buy this, I buy that, and they think that it is enough.
I know.
So right now, I always say you are on the high, right? Of this is what you're doing. But that's not going to last 10 years down the line. You're going to look at yourself and the control that gives somebody else over you and your life is not going to be worth it. Right now you're on a high, but all that stuff doesn't matter. And I was in a relationship where I was engaged and he was very, very controlling. And again, I had an amazing lifestyle. Even though I worked, I've always supported myself. I had an amazing lifestyle. He was so handsome and, so funny. And it was like, you have just the best life. And I remember, I looked at myself in the mirror one day and I had no idea who the hell I was. I had become this thing that he had just morphed me into being. And I didn't know who she was. I looked at myself and I felt disgusted. So, and that's when I decided to leave. And I wasn't married. I was engaged to him. I wasn't married. And I remember I told him I was leaving. He didn't believe me. And the very next day, I had 2 suitcases. I put everything I could in 2 suitcases and I literally ran out the door. He's like, where are you going? He's like in the driveway. It was like in a movie. I'm peeling off. I'm like,
I've done that too.
And I was like, I couldn't wait to get out of there. And I remember driving away and I put the windows down and just this air was coming into the car and I felt so free, even though I had $200 in my bank account because I had recently moved to California. So I wasn't working. I hadn't passed the bar yet. So I had $200 in my bank account. I had no money. I was going to luckily I had a friend in Beverly Hills and he and I were living in San Diego. So I was driving. I knew I had a place to stay, but I didn't know anything outside of that. And I was so afraid, but yet I was so free. And people don't understand how much freedom authenticity brings to you when you actually live how you want to live.
So true. And you didn't let the fear stop you. I didn't let the fear stop me. And like you said, living in your truth, being your most fearlessly authentic person that's why that resonates so much with me is because I didn't, like you, Patty, I didn't know who I was. And all I knew was that I was a really good mom. And that is something that I could continue to do for the rest of my life. But now I had to figure things out. We had to go through the divorce and things like that. And luckily I was okay for a while. But that's when I ramped up my hustle even more because you only have
so what did you do? So you got a divorce. What did you do? Yeah, I think people are interested in hearing what the hell did you do? You got a divorce. How did you get yourself together?
Well, I had to figure out who I was. I didn't know who I was anymore. And I know we've heard people tell that story before, but I really, really, I'm 42 years old. I've got these 2 daughters that are looking up at me and going, okay, kind of, you just fucked up our lives. So what are we doing next?
Right.
And
yeah.
Luckily, my little one was she was only 8. So she was my best little buddy. Alyssa, my oldest, where I am here in Miami, she hated me. She was 13. Again, no good age for you to ever get divorced, but I had to just step up to it. My parents were worried about me. I had enough money for the next 10 years to figure out my shit. Right?
It's good.
Because I had alimony. Again, I was
so
lucky.
Important.
I got alimony and child support. So I wasn't
very lucky.
your typical single mom, and he was also a very present dad.
Right.
He actually became a better father after the divorce. So what did I do?
Right.
I had to first figure out who I was and what did I want to do. The only thing that I knew, I couldn't go back to being a buyer because I needed to still be present for the girls. And so I couldn't work full time or the hours for a buyer. But what I could do is something that I loved, which was fitness. So that's when I started working every single day as a trainer and really amping up my training business. Instead of training people in their homes, I was training in a gym, and it was I had the socialization. I started building up my confidence. I started dating. I started having a lot more sex, which was wonderful. And it was just, I started figuring out who Jodi was. And it was a really wonderful time of self-discovery because I had no idea who I was anymore. I completely lost myself in the relationship. But I knew, having these two daughters, that I had to figure it out fast because they were looking to me as their female role model. But I lost all my friends. And he hooked up with, he got into a relationship right away, of course. And so all of the friends, I was dating much younger men. It just happened that way. I didn't know what was going to happen to me or like everything. But I had really, really short hair. I started growing my hair. He wouldn't let me get a boob job. I got a boob job. It was just all the things that I wanted to do.
All the things you wanted to do.
Yes. He liked my hair short like a boy because nobody would look at me. He liked me to wear sneakers instead of heels so nobody would look at me. So I started wearing high heels, growing my hair, got a boob job. And then what happened was that, I was hitting the gym even harder, and people started coming up to me at the gym and asking me about if I was a fitness competitor, which was always a dream of mine. And then in 2007, I started competing. And so that's when and then I got into a long-term relationship in 2008, which became very toxic. And given the name of this show, this was a man that I fell madly in love with. Passion was off the charts. But the problem was you lose the romance because there ain't no finance.
Exactly. Amen. Yes.
So what I had in my marriage was finance and no romance.
Right.
But this one I had romance, but no finance. So
you got out both.
I'm like, okay. But at last I stayed in a toxic relationship for a long time. But I knew, and he knew, that the reason that it was hard for me to stay with him was he wasn't as hardworking as me. And it's okay. It's okay, but it wasn't okay for me.
Right. Yes. And I think another thing I think people don't understand is when I say no romance without finance, like, oh, you're just a gold digger. And I always say no. And in fact, I will say this till the day I die. You don't have to match me dollar for dollar, but you have to match me hustle for hustle.
Yes.
Right?
Amen.
Yes, that's it. That's all I want is for you to match me hustle by hustle. So if I'm going out working, you need to be going out working. You don't have to make the same amount of money, right? But I'm not going to be going out working and then coming home, you're eating Cheetos, watching the game on the couch, and that's all you've been doing all day. That's not going to work.
Right. So he had a very good job, but he was home at 3 when I was training clients until 8 o'clock, and he didn't. And so then, Patty, what happened? Just to give you, we'll speak very shortly about this. Is that because he got off at work at 3, and I wasn't coming home until 8, or getting together with him until like 8, because I was training clients from 6 in the morning. Had that 3-hour window that all trainers have in the middle of the day from 12 to 3, and then you start your second shift, 5 to 8. And so I was doing that because my daughters were older and everything else. And so he didn't get it. He was like, why aren't you free at 3? Well, then I'm going to go find another girl. Well, I'm going to go flirt with these girls. Well, I'm going to go have an affair. Well, I'm going to go cheat on you. Well, I'm going to go find somebody who... He's like, I make a lot of money. I work. I have a good job. And he did. He was an engineer. Yeah. He did. But it wasn't the right mentality for me. So I guess I need to go back and clarify. It wasn't about And the hustle wasn't there. It's like, well, if you're off at 3, why don't you have another job?
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Go do something.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
No, exactly, Jodi. So we're coming near the end of the podcast, but I love that, your story is just so inspiring, so wonderful. And it's a happy ending. You're married to Frank and he seems like such an amazing guy.
So I've got the romance and the finance. And
that's right. That's what I was just going to say. You have both, right? You have both. And I couldn't be happier for you. There's no one in this world that deserves it more. But before we end, I want to ask you, what is one piece of advice that you would give your younger self around finances and relationships?
Okay, regarding finances is always have your own money, ladies. Always, I don't care how wealthy he is. I don't care what a charmed life you're going to have. Be aware that usually a man who has a lot of money is going to want to control everything about you, especially if he knows you don't have any. So always have your own money. Do not settle into a relationship with somebody who doesn't respect the fact that you have a hustle. You want to hustle and you have your own money. So ladies, never, 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 never. I tell my daughters the same thing. Do not ever give up your independence and having your own money. It will save you everything about who you are in the long run. Trust me, trust me, trust me. And your children will learn from you and you will be able to teach others. And regarding relationships, I think that was the other part of the question, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I said money and relationships, but I think you covered it actually as far as how you are with relationships and money.
Yeah. Yeah. You've got to match that energy. The energy's got to be there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Jodi, I couldn't have said it better myself. I couldn't have ended this episode better than what you just told all the listeners out there. I am so grateful to you for joining me. I love you so much. You inspire me. I respect you. And I just can't wait to do this again. So hopefully we'll have you on again.
I love and adore you as well. This is like a love fest right now. And I want to also say that as I've seen you grow, I'm going to get a little emotional here. As I've seen you grow as the woman who was kicking ass on TikTok and talking about the things that you were talking about and growing into this role, podcaster, giving all this amazing financial advice, that everybody who's listening to this podcast, I want you to understand that you can, to keep learning. The information that you share with everybody, Patty, is not just for young people. It's for at every age. And I am blessed to call you a friend, and I feel grateful that we collided and we're still together and loving each other, and you inspire me as well.
Thank you, Jodi. You're going to make me cry. I love you. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
My pleasure.
All right, everyone. Thank you for joining the podcast, and we are off.